Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you all for being here. I was a federal prosecutor working with task forces, NYPD, and an assortment of federal law enforcement agents for 10 years. And Chief Gerke, what you just said is exactly what every law enforcement officer I ever worked with said, which is we got to root out the bad apples because the vast, vast majority are really good apples working really hard to defend our communities and promote public safety. It's interesting as I sit here because what I'm hearing from the witnesses on the ground about what the needs are and what effective policing is very different from what I'm hearing from my colleagues up here. And Sheriff Barnes, I think you made an important distinction just now in the questioning you received from my colleague from Alabama when he said more policing would be better, and you said right policing is more effective. And I think that's incredibly important. More in terms of quantity does not necessarily make the difference. And I want to focus a little bit on what several of you have talked about in terms of community-based policing, and especially community-based violence intervention programs. Commissioner Cox, can I start with you? Can you just explain what you mean when you say you engage and utilize community-based violence intervention programs?
Sure, thank you. So, community policing really is about building trust, and how do you go about doing that? And you can do it multiple ways, from engaging youth in games and things of that nature, to mentoring kids in school, to actually working with residents to address whatever the issue of the day. The more you work with people and they get to understand our officers and see that they're people too, the more trust they have, the more we were able to provide education tips on how to stay safe. The more they're able to tell us about where we should be, right? Data is one thing, but having on-the-ground information and intel from the people that live there around the problems that go on, that is how we can put officers in the right place to help prevent these things from happening in the first place. And so understanding what the issues are in these communities through dialogue, through actually building relationships, we're able to also bring in partners to address their other issues and problems that might be the root of some of the reasons why people choose to go down the life of crime.
So is it fair to say that if your officers had more time to spend in the communities, that they would be able to prevent more crime from happening before it happens?
I believe so. Working in conjunction with the residents there, yes, absolutely.
And one of the things that several of you have touched upon is, and Chief Gerke, you just mentioned this, and I think this is important, is the prevalence of mental health issues in the calls, the 911 calls, and other requests that are made to all of your offices. I guess I have a basic question, which is, would it be helpful to you if you had support from mental health professionals who could help to either diffuse a situation or handle a mental health issue once it had been diffused? Is that something that support would be helpful to your staff?
I think that support would be helpful to any law enforcement agency, absolutely. That is because mental health issues are so prevalent in our communities.
And your officers, am I right, are not trained mental health professionals?
They have some training in helping those folks in crisis that we encounter, but no, they are not trained, qualified mental health professionals.
One of the things that the chairman has talked about here today several times is the notion of illegal firearms. And one of the issues, I think, Chief Gerke, that you may be able to touch on is there was a significant and deadly mass shooting in your county in 2019. And it was an individual who couldn't pass a background check, had been adjudicated by a judge to be mentally incompetent, so he wasn't able to buy a gun legally. and he went and bought a gun illegally and then used it for a mass shooting, if there were universal background checks that would apply to private sales as well, that would have caught that shooter, wouldn't have?
Gentleman's time's expired. The witness, you can answer the question.
So absolutely, that mass shooting was perpetrated by an individual that could not pass a background check because of his mental health status, and he did go and purchase a firearm from a individual that was making these on a personal basis. Although I believe he was making about 60 a year on a personal basis, so he was absolutely he was a manufacturer. So if he was required to do a background check, I think that yes, that would have been caught.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a New York Times article titled, quote, "How Gun Traffickers Get Around State Gun Laws," which shows that in New York and New Jersey, more than 2/3 of guns used in crimes come from out of state, mostly from states in the South with much more lax gun laws, and that 6,000 guns used in crimes in California came from other states with lax gun laws, such as Texas.
Without objection, the gentleman's time's expired. I now recognize Mr. Crane of Arizona for 5 minutes.